Okay, so I want to finish up the notes for us, and since I'm not going to be here today, I figured this would be a great way of getting you to finish the notes and then move on to the next thing that I'm asking you to do. So here we go. Our targets are this: cultural variations. And what we're looking at are, we've been talking about culture as a whole. Now we're going to look at the differences that exist within a culture. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to describe culture universals and explain why they exist. Well, guess what? We've already done that. Remember, we talked about all of those, the different, I showed you the photos that you have, uh, oops, went the wrong way. Okay, the photos, things like this, that the universals and all those things that are part of each culture. All right, so we're going to also examine something called ethnocentrism and cultural relativism to understand their importance when studying different cultures. And finally, we're going to identify the factors that account for variations among and within cultures. So let's look at those right now. So we're going to look at ethnocentrism, and this is the tendency to view one culture as superior. And number two, practice of judging another culture by the standards of one's own culture. The, the problem with someone being ethnocentric is that they cannot, nor do they recognize the value of any other culture except their own. They see only their culture as superior, meaning that there is nothing another culture has to offer. They don't, for example, if we looked at Chinese culture, we would never have appreciated the fact that Chinese food is really good. And there's other things that we could have got that we have gotten from China, any number of different things that have become a part of our culture that it was originated in China. For example, fireworks. Okay, those are great. We love them on the 4th of July. So we want to avoid doing that, judging our or looking at somebody else's culture as inferior because we see only our culture as inferior. When we do that, we lose the possibility of enriching our own culture. And we don't want to do that. So we don't want to judge another culture by the standards of your own. If you make a practice of not doing that, then you are doing cultural relativism, and that's the belief that a culture should be judged by its own standards. Researchers attempt to understand cultural practices from the point of view of the members of society being studied. In other words, they're trying not to come in with preconceived ideas. They are trying to see the culture for what it is, what it's worth. Um, I put an example here, India, and the idea of killing cows is absolutely horrifying to them. They don't allow cows to be killed in any way. A cow can walk into a home without being stopped. You certainly don't want to be the person that, if you're in a car, run a cow down, because they would see that as a real threat to their culture. And there's any number of other things that we can talk about that are really rather foreign to how we believe, and yet there's so many things again that are part of India. Sure, we might see the cow thing as kind of odd, but other things that are so wonderful, the beauty of the Indian uh, art and well, if you know anything about their cinema, it's called Bollywood, and it's very different from us, but it has its own appeal. So cultural relativism is the idea that you're not going to judge a culture by your own culture, but you're going to look at it from the point of view of the people who actually belong to that society. All right, then there are also variations within societies, subcultures they're called, and and here is a list of possibilities. Age, if you think about a subculture with age, you might think of children. And then you might think of preteen, or the teenagers or adolescents, young adults, elderly. All of these are subcultures within a larger society. Gender, of course, male, female, and then today, of course, there are additional views and ways of looking at gender. Ethnic issues, ethnicity, the different ethnic cultures that exist within our own: German, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, all of those. Religion, of course, there are so many different religions within our country, but some countries there might only exist one religion, but a subculture would be something that exists within a larger society. So there could be a subculture in religion. Political subcultures: Republicans, Democrats, Green Party, a militia party, the Tea Party, any number of different ones. Geographic could be the difference between the southern portion of the nation as opposed to the northern portion of the nation. Another geographic subculture would be Appalachia, and those differences that exist within the cultures. Social class would be things like upper, lower, middle class. Occupations can also be a subculture. For example, you could have physicians, teachers, military, and so on. So many different types of occupations that can be subcultures. All right, so they are just, if you want to make it, they're parts of a larger society that make a whole, right? So subcultures. Then we also have something that, well, I'm jumping ahead. Subcultures do not usually present a threat to society. They're just parts of society. And in modern society, we are dependent on many subcultures. You can see a list here: military, lawyers, teachers, police, physicians, religious leaders, youth, elderly, all of which are part of a subculture. But we also have something called countercultures. And countercultures we really heard a lot about in the 50s and 60s, especially the 60s. Some groups reject the major values and norms and practices of a larger society and replace them with their own set of cultural practices. Organized crime in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Hippie movement of the 60s, and even to a degree preppers for today, people who do not want to be a part of the larger society but have replaced their way or their view with, or replace their view of things with the views of a larger society. Okay, so they have their views are no, I'm sorry, I'm saying that backwards. The larger, what they do is their views replace the larger society views. Okay, now moving on. Here's a picture of, and this is to think about, it's a cartoon, and what you're seeing here is the exact same thing being said, but from different points of view. Take a look at that and think about, that your belief system, your culture, causes you to view some things, and possibly if you were a different culture, it might see it as exactly the opposite. Okay, so those are the last of the notes. And so please complete these notes and then upload this this set of notes for or to Moodle, please. Okay.